At the end of Tschiffely Mill Road, crumbling red walls reach towards the sky like a scene out of Indiana Jones.
So the Seneca Quarry itself was probably used by the Indians initially, because there are remnants of stone making and so on. So all along the Potomac River there were Indian sites. It was a very, very highly populated area because the Potomac was a trade route, and it was also full of fish, meaning protein. So it was a site where there were a lot of natives who lived there first. And then in the colonial era, the Peter family, which was a Scottish tobacco trading family, they acquired all this land during the War of Independence, about 11,000 acres of Montgomery County. My name is Garrett Peck, and I'm the author of The Smithsonian Castle and the Seneca Quarry. And one of their sons, John Parke Custis Peter, acquired the land, and then he's the one who then bid on the Smithsonian Castle project in 1846. He had the quarry basically from when he inherited the farm in 1828 and until he died in January of 1848. So as the Smithsonian Castle project was underway. So he had it for about 20 years or so. So basically it was a harbor right there at the foot of his quarry. And once they built the canal, well, now there's a watery highway to be able to ship all that stone all the way out to DC and points further. And thus he was then able to bid on construction projects. So the quarry and the canal, they were intertwined just like that, because stone is really heavy. You need some way to ship it in the market. Back then, all the roads were just dirt, and you couldn't carry stone blocks very far. But once you have a canal boat, now you can take them great distances. The mix of laborers at the quarry was a mix of essentially immigrants and white, mostly white immigrants, and then slaves, and then after the Civil War, former slaves. We have no payroll records, unfortunately, other than one that I found from the 1820s in the National Archives. In many cases, people had signed an X, or one person had signed for a list of people, and all the list of people were first name basis. So it was like no last name, and you're like, okay, these were slaves, very, very clearly. And this was probably either the owner of the slaves or the overseer, the foreman, who would then sign for them and take their pay for them. So in that case, we know there were several dozen people. But in the peak of the actual quarry, like say during the Smithsonian Castle project, all the records, they all burned up. At the castle, there was a major fire in January of 1865, so all the building records burned up. So we don't know how many workers were actually there at the site. What we do have, though, is photographic evidence. And then there's another great photo showing the biggest of all the quarries, what we call the, quote, the big quarry, and that's the one that has the most archaeological remains. And in this photo, probably from the 1890s at some point, it shows two rows of workers. And the top row are white workers, and the bottom row are black workers. So we think probably most of the ones who were actually doing the quarrying were probably black workers. They were considered to be day laborers rather than employees, so institutional racism right there. But they did all the backbreaking work of splitting the rock and whatnot. But there's definitely evidence, and of course lots of stories of the families who are still around, of their great grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers working there at the quarry. So it was a lot of people. It probably employed hundreds of people in its heyday until it closed in 1901.
Every year when the foliage dies back, making things visible, Greg gives an in-person tour of both the mill and the quarry.
What motivates me to lead these tours is the ability to share these sites with other people. It's such a rare site, and everyone knows about the Smithsonian Castle, but no one recognizes or no one realizes, hey, the stone came from somewhere. Now, the story of the Seneca quarries and the C&O Canal are just like this. It's the C&O Canal that enables the quarry to be an operational quarry that can bid on projects in the Washington, D.C. region, because in essence, it's a watery highway that carries the stone all the way down to D.C. Right here, we are at mile marker 22.7 on the C&O Canal. So 0 is Georgetown. So it's a way of getting all that stone. Stone's very, very heavy, and in an era before we had roads, or if we did have roads, they were really, really muddy. You couldn't carry several ton stone blocks on these roads. So hence, this was an opportunity once the C&O Canal opened up to get the stone down to the DC market. And that's what enables then John Parke Custis Peter to bid on the Smithsonian Castle project in 1846 and then wins it. You look at any building, look at the bricks that are on there. They didn't just magically appear. They didn't make them right there in that site. Or if you have a wooden house, or even a house with vinyl siding, there's some factory that made that. There were people who made that. There's a story behind all the building materials that you have. We take it all for granted. So the building committee gets organized, and they decide they're going to build a building. And it's going to become this science center on the National Mall. So first thing they have to do, though, is get a design going. And then lastly, they need a stone to build the building. And so they ask for bids from all the quarries all around the Mid-Atlantic. In this particular place, here is a site you can actually go see where people worked to quarry the stone to get it out of the cliffside, and then to put it on a canal boat, and then to take it to the Smithsonian Castle construction site, and then built this magnificent building out of this. It's just such a remarkable story. And how they did that, this is an ancient technique derived by the Romans of taking an iron rod and a sledgehammer. You'd have 4 men, probably African Americans, many of them former slaves. One guy held the rod and 3 guys with sledgehammers. Yikes! And then they would pound that rod into vertically down into the stone. And you get a whole row of those going about 3 feet apart, and then you would attach a wedge. And you had a special device, and you started prying at the wedge. And at some point then, because this is a sedimentary rock, it's going to snap at one of those lines. Right. And boom, it's just the giant rock is just going to fall off here into this valley. So this is kind of a different, because this is a you see down here there's a rock, you see a bunch of holes in them that are very clearly dynamite holes. So I'll show you, we have a little ledge we have to go over. So this is probably the last quarries that they were using. Again, buildings don't build themselves, it's people who build them. So being able to share that history and to learn about all the scandals that happened because of the building, it's just, to me, it's so remarkable. It's how we piece together not just the site, but connecting it to us, to our own individual histories and our collective history as well. The Seneca Quarry itself is actually completely protected. The space below the cliff line is all part of the C&O Canal National Historical Park. Then everything above the cliff line is all part of Seneca Creek State Park. So it's all protected land between federal and state. It can never ever be taken away or anything. So that's the good news. The downside is that the stone cutting mill itself has been heavily vandalized in recent years. Again, it's right off of Tschiffely Mill Road, so it's easy to access. And a lot of people are going in there and they are taking spray paint cans and they're putting their names on there and so on. So which is really, really tragic. The whole place is just getting covered in graffiti. And again, if we don't respect and maintain this property, then it's going to go away. Gradually, it's going to disappear entirely. The preservation of history is really important to me personally because it's how we reconnect ourselves to our own past. It's a way of explaining who we are, essentially. Whether you come from Europe, whether your family came from Africa, it's a way for us to reach back and help explain, here's how we are, here's our common history, we as Americans, and here's what the common history that we all have, that we all share together, which is why we have to preserve it. That's also why we study it, so we can understand how we got to where we are today and who we are as a people.